Snow drifted like torn feathers through the dying light, soft and endless, burying the world in quiet. Lila Mae Carter knelt in the white hush, her hands red and raw where they clawed through the frozen soil. The earth was iron beneath her nails, stubborn and cold, as though even God refused to take another body tonight. Her breath came in clouds, shallow and trembling. Beside her lay a still form beneath a thin quilt, her sister Marisol, pale as the snow itself. The wind pulled at the fabric, lifting it like a hand reaching for heaven, and then letting it fall again. Lila whispered a prayer that kept breaking before it could reach the end. Her voice was hoarse, not from crying, but from calling for help that never came. The hills around her were empty, no riders, no smoke, no light. Only snow and silence and the distant cry of a wolf, hollow and far away. She pressed her forehead against the mound she'd managed to shape, tears freezing against her lashes. "I promised you a grave, Mari," she murmured. "Not this, not like this." Her horse lay not 20 paces off, a dark shape under frost. Its eyes were open, rimmed with ice. The trail they'd followed from the mountain pass had vanished hours ago, swallowed whole by the storm. She was alone now, the world turned to pale eternity, and she could feel her body giving up, first her fingers, then her legs, as if the cold were quietly undoing her piece by piece. She dug one last handful of dirt and let it fall over her sister's face, whispering again, "Sleep now." Then she folded her hands in her lap, too tired to cry anymore. The snow kept coming, faster now, softening everything, smoothing her sister's features into something peaceful, something almost beautiful. Lila bowed her head. For a long while, there was only the whisper of the wind through her hair. Then she heard it, footsteps. At first, she thought it was the echo of her heartbeat. But the rhythm was too slow, too heavy. A crunch in the snow, measured and certain, coming closer from the pines. Her numb hands fumbled for the pistol at her belt. The trigger was frozen. Her breath hitched as a shape moved through the curtain of snow, broad-shouldered, towering, dark against the white. The wind carried the scent of smoke and pine, and something faintly wild. He came closer, step by deliberate step, until she could see his face. Bronze skin beneath a mane of black hair tied with rawhide. A broad chest bare under a tattered buffalo cloak. Snowflakes melted against his shoulders, sliding down like silver tears. His eyes, dark, calm, and unreadable, rested on the body at her knees, then rose to her trembling hands. "Stay back," she rasped, raising the pistol that wouldn't fire. "Please, just bury her. I can't do it anymore." He didn't speak. Only studied her, the faintest flicker of something, sorrow? Recognition? In his gaze. Then, without a word, he knelt beside her sister's body. His movements were slow, reverent, as though afraid to disturb the silence that had taken root here. He touched the earth, felt its frozen defiance, and then looked at her again. Lila expected him to turn away, to leave her to die beside her promise. But instead, he began to dig. Not a grave. She realized it slowly, watching his hands carve a shallow pit in the snow, arrange dry twigs, strike flint. Sparks bloomed and died, bloomed again. The first breath of fire came like a miracle, orange light licking at the dark, smoke curling upward like prayer. Her tears returned, hot enough to sting. "I said bury her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not me." Still, he said nothing. He fed the fire with patience, his breath steady, his face unreadable. When the flames were strong enough, he dragged his buffalo cloak closer and gestured once, firmly, to the heat. She hesitated, shaking her head. But the warmth reached her before her pride could. Her teeth chattered. The firelight flickered against her sister's still face, painting her in gold. Lila crawled closer and felt the heat creep up her legs, thawing pain into ache. Her body shook uncontrollably, but not from fear. From life returning. He left her only once, disappearing into the pines. She thought he'd gone for good. She almost hoped he had, so she could surrender quietly beside her sister. But then he returned, carrying 2 rabbits slung over his shoulder, and an armful of deadwood. Snow clung to his hair, his skin gleaming faintly in the firelight. He cleaned the rabbits with the precision of a man who had done this 1,000 times, roasting them over the flames. The smell of cooking meat filled the hollow, sharp and holy. Lila hadn't eaten in 2 days. When he handed her a piece on a stick, she stared at it like it was sin. "I can't," she said, but her voice trembled. He placed it in her hands anyway, then sat across from her, watching the snow fall between them. She ate, slow at first, then desperate, tears streaking through soot on her face. When she was done, she whispered again, softer now. "Thank you." He inclined his head slightly as though to say, "That's enough." Words would only cheapen the moment. The wind howled through the trees. The fire wavered. Lila stared at her sister's face, then at the man's, his scars catching the light like old map lines, his jaw set in the calm of someone who'd already buried too many things. For a long time they sat like that, two strangers stitched together by silence and the will to survive one more night. When the snow grew heavier, he rose and began stacking branches into a crude shelter. She tried to protest, to say she didn't need help, but her body betrayed her. He spread the buffalo cloak over her shoulders, the warmth of it nearly breaking her. She could smell him on it, smoke, leather, earth and something older, like stormlight trapped in stone. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He paused, hands stilling on the branch. For the first time he spoke, his voice low and quiet, like a river beneath ice. "No one should die in the cold." Lila looked down at the fire, her throat tightening. She did. He said nothing more, only adjusted the lean of the shelter, and sat back against the log beside her. The storm thickened, swallowing the horizon. For the first time since dawn, Lila felt the edges of sleep pull at her. She tried to fight it, afraid that if she closed her eyes, she'd never wake, but exhaustion dragged her under anyway. She dreamed of her sister's laughter, the cabin on the hill, sunlight through curtains that no longer existed. Then of hands, steady, warm, lifting her from the snow, tucking the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Somewhere, a voice murmured words she didn't understand, deep and ancient, half prayer and half song. The rhythm lulled her deeper into the dark. When she opened her eyes again, dawn had broken pale and silver. The fire was dying, reduced to coals. Her breath fogged the air, but she was warm beneath the cloak. She turned, and found him gone. Panic fluttered through her chest. The place where he'd sat was empty, the snow disturbed by his tracks leading into the trees. For a moment, she thought he'd vanished like a spirit, some wandering ghost of mercy sent to ease her passing. But then she saw it. Near her sister's grave, a line of stones neatly arranged, a single eagle feather pressed into the mound. She rose, unsteady on her feet, and stared at it through blurred eyes. The snow had stopped falling. The world was still. Somewhere far off, a horse neighed. She turned toward the sound, and froze. Through the morning mist, the giant Apache was coming back, leading her dead horse on a rope, its saddle stripped of ice, a bundle of firewood slung across his back. His hair blew in the wind, his chest bare again despite the cold. Their eyes met across the distance, hers wide with confusion, his calm and steady, as if returning had never been a question. And in that instant something shifted inside her. Not safety, not yet, but the faint tremor of it, the first warmth beneath the snow. The morning was quiet, the air sharp enough to sting. Lila woke beneath the buffalo cloak, her breath clouding pale in the cold light. For a long moment, she didn't move, only listened. The forest beyond the camp crackled faintly as snow slid from the pines. Somewhere close, water trickled, steady and alive. She turned her head, half expecting to find herself alone again. But he was there, kneeling by the stream, rinsing blood from his hands. The light caught on his shoulders, on the curve of old scars, on the calm that seemed carved into his bones. He looked up once, meeting her eyes, then returned to his work without a word. Something about his silence steadied her more than speech could. She sat up slowly, pulling the cloak tighter. Nearby, the fire he built still smoked. The grave lay behind her, neat and quiet beneath its crown of stones and feather. For the first time since Marisol's death, the sight of it didn't feel like a knife. He came back carrying a leather pouch and knelt beside her. Steam curled from the spout as he poured thick, white milk into a tin cup and handed it to her. She hesitated, fingers trembling around the warmth. "Where did you Goat, he said simply, his voice rough from disuse. Found her near the trees. Lost. The milk was warm and faintly sweet. She drank, the heat spreading through her chest like mercy itself. Her lips quivered, not from cold this time, but from something she couldn't name. Gratitude felt too small a word. Thank you, she whispered. He inclined his head, folding the pouch closed again. You bury her with your hands, he said softly, his eyes on the grave. That is love. Lila stared at the ground, her throat tightening. She was the strong one. I only followed. He studied her for a long moment. You still here, he said finally. Maybe strength looks like that. The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through her quietly. She had no answer. They walked later, after the sky began to clear. She followed him through the trees, clutching her cloak, the world silent but for the creak of snow beneath their boots. Every step hurt. Her body was bruised and half-starved, yet she couldn't stop. The need to keep moving, to find something beyond this frozen nowhere, pressed her forward. He led the way, his pace steady, eyes scanning the horizon as if the earth itself whispered to him. His name, when she finally asked, came out like a secret carried on wind. Chayton, he said. It means falcon. She liked the way it sounded. Strong but patient, shaped by air and distance. When they reached the ridgeline, the valley opened below them. White plains stretching into forever, a thin black ribbon of river winding through it. Smoke rose faintly from a cluster of buildings. Dry Creek, she guessed. Civilization, or something close. Relief washed through her, followed by unease. She hadn't seen another soul since the raid that took Marisol. The thought of faces again, of questions, made her stomach twist. Chayton saw her hesitation and slowed. You have people there? She shook her head. No one left. He nodded once. Then you choose what to be now. His way of speaking, measured, stripped of waste, felt like the land itself, rough, honest, ancient. Lila walked in silence for a while, letting the wind carry her thoughts. When the town came into view, a scattering of wooden buildings huddled beside the frozen creek, she drew her shawl tighter, instinctively stepping a little behind him. Dry Creek was alive with suspicion. Men leaned from porches as they passed, eyes following them. A woman carrying laundry paused mid-step. Children whispered and pointed before being yanked inside. Lila could feel their stares burning through her, through him. The word Apache hissed across the street like a fuse. Chayton didn't react. His shoulders stayed level, his gaze straight ahead. The only sign he'd heard was the faint tightening of his jaw. Lila wanted to speak, to say something that might protect him, or herself, but no words came. Shame pressed hard against her ribs. At the general store, an old man with clouded eyes muttered, "Ain't safe for decent folks to harbor his kind." Lila met his gaze, voice shaking but clear. "He saved my life." The man snorted. "That so? Then you best keep walkin', girl, before that changes." Chayton touched her elbow gently, guiding her away. His hand was warm through the cloak. She bit her lip, fighting tears of humiliation. They found shelter at the edge of town, a small barn behind the livery. The innkeeper had refused them outright. The sheriff, Rourke, a tall man with tired eyes, had said only, "He sleeps in the stable, ma'am. That's the law here." When the door shut behind him, she whispered bitterly, "Law never helped anyone I loved." Chayton's expression softened, just slightly. Law made by men. Mercy made by hearts. She wanted to believe that. But the town's coldness clung like another storm. Inside the stable, the air smelled of hay and dust and old horses. Lila helped him spread straw for bedding, her fingers numb. He lit a lantern, its glow honeygold in the dim. For the first time, she noticed a scar crossing his shoulder, a long, pale line like lightning frozen into flesh. She turned away quickly, ashamed of looking too long. He noticed. "White soldiers," he said quietly, matter of fact. "Long ago." "I'm sorry," she murmured. He shrugged. "I live. Many do not." The lantern flickered between them, throwing shadows that swayed like ghosts. She sat near the wall, drawing her knees close. They called her sinner, she said suddenly. My sister. For living alone. For wanting land in her own name. He watched her, silent. They took everything. Said women like us don't belong. Her voice cracked. She begged them to stop. Chayton's eyes darkened. Men with no roots, he said, almost to himself. They destroy to feel alive. She looked at him, the tears spilling freely now. Then why do you help me? He leaned forward slightly, the firelight touching his face. Because you still bury your dead with care. Because you speak to them when you think no one hears. The quiet stretched between them until the snow outside began to fall again, soft and slow. She rose, wordless, and took her small bundle of food from her satchel. Half a biscuit she'd saved from a stranger's mercy weeks before. She placed it on the crate beside his bedroll. You should eat, she said. He glanced at it once, then at her. You need it more. Her lips lifted faintly. I've had worse nights. When she turned to leave, he called her name for the first time. Lila. She stopped. He pointed to the feather tucked into her sister's grave marker outside the barn door. Eagle feather means spirit not gone, just flying higher. Something in her chest broke quietly open. She didn't answer, only nodded and stepped out into the snow. The cold bit at her skin, but her heart felt oddly warm. In the silence behind her, she heard movement. The faint sound of him lifting the biscuit, maybe to save it for morning. She smiled faintly through her tears. When she reached the inn porch, she glanced back once. Through the barn's cracked slats, she saw the lantern still burning, its glow steady against the dark. And then she saw it. Her old gray shawl folded neatly beside his bedroll, untouched. A gesture of thanks, or of promise. The snow fell harder, erasing her tracks one by one. By the third morning, the snow had hardened into a glass crust that cracked beneath each step. Lila moved through the town square with her shawl pulled tight, the air filled with whispers that cut sharper than the wind. Men lingered on porches, spitting tobacco and words like stones. Women turned their faces away. Every eye followed the tall Apache, walking a few paces behind her. Even the dogs quieted when he passed. Dry Creek was a place that measured worth by blood and gossip, and Lila could feel both running cold through her veins. The clerk at the store refused to meet her gaze when she asked for work. Ain't much need for hired help who brings savages to town, he said flatly. She left without replying, her jaw trembling too much to speak. Chayton waited outside, standing beside a fence post, arms crossed. He looked neither surprised nor angry, only still, the way mountains look before lightning strikes. When she approached, he tilted his head slightly, reading her face. No? She shook her head. No. They walked toward the edge of town, where the land opened wide and empty. The sound of boots followed them, laughter behind, low and cruel. She didn't turn, but she could feel the weight of it pressing between her shoulders. Chayton stopped once, eyes narrowing, and the laughter died like a candle snuffed by wind. At the livery, he tended the borrowed horse while she sat on the rail watching. He moved with calm precision, every motion a quiet defiance. She found herself studying the curve of his hands, the faint scars across his knuckles, the way his breath clouded and vanished. He looked up suddenly, and she dropped her gaze, embarrassed by her staring. Your sister, he said quietly. You talk to her still? Lila hesitated. Every night, she admitted. I tell her what she missed, the smell of rain, the shape of clouds. I think she listens. He nodded, tying the rope with a final tug. The dead hear truth clearer than the living. The words stayed with her as they returned to the stable that had become their refuge. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney of the saloon nearby. Music drifted through the wind, a fiddle tune stretched thin by distance. Lila paused by the door, her reflection ghost-like in the lantern glass. If people think I'm your woman, she said quietly, they'll never let me work here again. His expression didn't change. If they think, he replied, they already have. She exhaled, the truth burning more than she expected. Then what do I do? He took the lantern from her hands, set it down, and began stacking wood for a fire. Live anyway. That night, the flames painted the stable walls gold and copper. Lila mended a torn sleeve, while he carved a small piece of driftwood into the shape of a bird. The air smelled of smoke, leather, and the faint sweetness of hay. For the first time in weeks, she felt something close to calm. When the wind died, he handed her the carving. "Eagle," he said. "For your sister." She turned it over gently in her fingers, tracing the wings with her thumb. "It's beautiful." He shrugged. "Only wood." "Then why does it feel alive?" He didn't answer, but a shadow of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. She set it carefully beside the lantern, afraid to break the moment. "You've seen too much," she said softly. "War, hatred. Why not leave? Find a place where you're not hated." He looked into the fire, eyes catching the light. "I tried. But no land forgets what blood was spilled on it. This one calls me back." "Even if it hurts?" "Yes." His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Because pain remembers truth." The stable settled into stillness again, the night breathing around them. Lila watched him as sleep crept near, his profile calm against the firelight. She wanted to ask who he'd lost, what ghosts trailed him through these snows, but something in his silence told her he'd already answered. Days passed. The snow began to soften. Icicles dripped from the eaves. Lila found work cleaning the saloon before dawn. Meager pay, but enough to eat. The bartender, a red-faced man named Doyle, watched her too long whenever she passed. "You got nerve," he told her once, keeping that redskin close. "Don't be surprised when it bites you." She ignored him, but fear settled like grit under her skin. When she returned to the stable that evening, Chayton was gone. His bedroll lay folded neatly, his bow missing. Panic rose fast. She searched the road until the moon climbed high, and found him at the edge of the woods, kneeling before a cross made of pine. Her breath caught. It was Marisol's name carved faintly into the bark, the bird carving perched beside it. "You did this," she whispered, stepping closer. He stood slowly, eyes on the grave. She deserved better than cold earth. Her throat tightened. "You hardly knew her." "I know what sisters mean." She stared at him, understanding dawning like dawn itself. He wasn't just helping her. He was trying to make peace with his own ghosts. She wanted to ask, but the wind shifted, carrying the echo of laughter. Rough, familiar. Outlaws, somewhere beyond the ridge. Her blood ran cold. "Those voices," she whispered. "I know them." Chayton turned his head sharply. "Who?" "The men who—" her voice cracked. "They killed Marisol. Took the deed to our land." He said nothing, but his jaw set hard. She stepped closer, clutching his arm. "Please no. There's no justice out there. Only more graves." His gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "Justice isn't theirs to keep." "You'll die if you go," she said, desperation trembling through her. He looked down at her then, eyes dark as riverstone. "Then you'll have buried too." Her grip loosened. The wind moaned through the trees. She wanted to beg him again, but the fire in his face made it useless. So she followed instead. The forest closed around them as they moved through the dark. Snow hissed beneath their boots, owls watching from high branches. Every sound felt louder, each step, each breath. When they reached the ridge, the outlaws' camp flickered below, firelight dancing on rifles and whiskey bottles. Lila's stomach twisted. She recognized one. The man with the scarred cheek who'd laughed while her sister screamed. Chayton studied the camp for a long time, then turned to her. "You stay here?" "No." He didn't argue. Only handed her his knife, its handle worn smooth from use. "Then light the lantern when I say." Her fingers trembled as she took it. He slipped away into the dark, a shadow among shadows. The snow muffled everything. She crouched behind a tree, heart pounding in her throat. Minutes passed, too many. Then she heard it, a soft whistle, low and sharp. She struck the flint. The lantern flared, golden against the white. A shout came from below, followed by chaos. Men stumbled toward the light, cursing, guns half drawn. Arrows hissed through the air. Silent, sure. One after another, the fires went out. Lila crouched lower, praying, shaking, whispering her sister's name. When the noise died, she opened her eyes. Chayton stood at the edge of the clearing, bow lowered, smoke curling from the dying campfire. Snow fell around him, soft as ash. She rose, stepping forward, her legs weak. "It's over." He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on something behind her. She turned, and saw the scarred man stumbling from the shadows, pistol raised. Before she could scream, the gunshot cracked the night apart. Pain didn't come. Only silence. Chayton had moved faster than the echo itself, his body between her and the muzzle. The outlaw fell before he could fire again. For a long time, neither spoke. The snow hissed on the dying coals. Then Lila's knees gave, and she pressed her face against his chest, sobbing once, quiet, raw. His hand came up, hesitant, then settled lightly on her hair. The night was cold, but between them, something burned steady and wordless. When they finally turned back toward town, dawn was bleeding into the sky. Smoke rose behind them from the ruined camp, curling like ghosts into morning. Chayton paused at the ridge, blood drying on his arm, eyes far away. Lila touched his sleeve gently. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Men like that never do." He looked at her then, voice a low rumble. "Then neither will I." And as the first sunlight touched the snow, the fire in his eyes caught the light. Something fierce, something holy, like a promise made beneath the ice. The storm broke before dawn. Wind tore through the pines, scattering snow like ghosts fleeing light. The world outside their camp had turned white and wild again, and Chayton stood at its edge, bow in hand, shoulders rigid beneath the pale sky. Lila watched him from where she sat near the embers, her hands trembling not from cold, but from the memory of last night's blood. The fire's last breath smoked between them, its glow fading into gray. She rose slowly, her skirt brushing against the frost. "They'll send more men," she said. Her voice sounded small against the wind. He didn't look at her. "Then we meet them." "You mean kill them?" He turned then, eyes calm, unreadable. "I mean stop them." There was no anger in his tone, only a tired certainty. She stepped closer, her heart pounding. "If you keep fighting, it never ends. I buried my sister because men like them never stop. I can't bury you too." His gaze softened, though the storm clawed around them. "You won't have to." Before she could answer, hoofbeats broke through the wind, distant but rising. Riders. The echo carried the promise of violence, of a reckoning that neither prayer nor reason could silence. Chayton moved quickly, covering the fire with snow, masking their tracks toward the ridge. Lila followed him through the pines, her breath short, every branch heavy with ice. The sound of horses drew closer. 4, maybe 5. Through the blur of snow she saw them. Men wrapped in dusters, rifles slung low. The lead rider wore the same red scarf she'd seen the night her sister died. The land thief. His voice carried, cold and sure. "Find them both. I want that Apache's head before sunrise." Chayton's hand brushed her arm, signaling silence. They crouched behind a fallen pine as the riders dismounted. The men spread out, boots crunching through crusted snow. She could see their faces now, half frozen, half drunk with vengeance. Her pulse thundered. She thought of her sister again, the shot, the scream, the silence afterward. Rage flickered in her chest, sharp as flint. Chayton reached for his bow. She caught his wrist. "Don't," she whispered. His eyes met hers, a question flickering there. "If you kill them, they'll send 10 more," she said. "You said once mercy comes from hearts, not laws. Prove it." The storm swelled, swallowing her words, but something in him stilled. His breath came slower. Then he nodded once and lowered the bow. The riders drew nearer, voices rising. One kicked over their fire pit. Another cursed. Lila's eyes darted to a lantern dangling from a horse's saddle. Fire and wind, the storm's language. She glanced at Chayton. He understood. Together, they moved. In a blur, he leapt from the snow, striking the first man's rifle away. Lila seized the lantern and smashed it against a tree trunk. Flames raced up the bark, devouring the dry needles in a sudden roar. The horses screamed and bolted, throwing 2 men to the ground. Smoke billowed through the storm, thick and choking. Chayton moved with terrifying grace, disarming 1 man and hurling him into the snow. Another raised his gun, but Lila was faster, swinging a branch that struck his hand, sending the weapon flying. He fell hard, groaning. She stood over him, panting, the firelight trembling across her face. The leader stumbled through the smoke, pistol drawn. "You're dead, both of you." Lila froze. The barrel was aimed at her. Chayton stepped forward, silent as the wind. The man turned the gun toward him instead. "You should have stayed in your own land." Chayton's voice was low, steady. "This land took my family too. Maybe it belongs to the dead now." Before the man could reply, his horse, terrified by the fire, jerked its reins and crashed into him, knocking the gun aside. The shot went wild. Chayton seized the man by his coat and slammed him to the ground. The world went still except for the howl of wind and the hiss of burning pine. Lila ran to his side, breath ragged. The man lay pinned beneath Chayton's knee, eyes wide with fear. He was older than she remembered, the lines of cruelty worn deep. Snow melted on his cheeks, making it look like tears. "Do it," the man spat. "You'll never stop us all." Chayton drew his knife, but Lila's hand closed over his wrist. "No more graves tonight," she whispered. For a long heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his fingers loosened, and the knife fell to the snow. He stood, stepping back. "Go," he said. The outlaw stared, disbelief flickering across his face. "You're letting me live?" Lila knelt, meeting the man's eyes. "My sister begged for mercy once. You laughed." She leaned closer, voice steady. "Now you'll remember who gave it." He crawled backward, terrified, then fled into the trees. The others followed, limping, vanishing into the storm. Only the fire remained, crackling in defiance of the cold. Chayton turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "You saved them," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No. I saved you." Snow began to fall again, softening the scorched earth. The fire's glow turned to embers, and the wind gentled, as though the world itself had exhaled. Lila's knees buckled. He caught her before she fell, holding her close. For a moment, there were no words, only the sound of her heartbeat against his chest. By dawn, the storm had passed. They stood on the ridge overlooking the valley. Below, the first blush of sunrise painted the snow pink and gold. Smoke rose faintly from the burned camp, curling like incense toward heaven. Lila reached into her pocket and drew out the small wooden eagle he'd carved. She placed it on the ground beside her sister's grave, where wildflowers now poked through the thawing crust. "She's free," she murmured. "And so are we." Chayton's shadow fell across hers. "Freedom isn't a gift," he said softly. "It's a promise we keep." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering in the light. "Then stay. Help me keep it." For a moment, he didn't answer. His face was turned toward the mountains, where smoke faded into blue. Then he unstrapped his bow and laid it gently at her feet. "No more war," he said. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of pine and ash. She knelt, picking up the bough with trembling hands. "Then we start again," she whispered. Behind them, the church bell in Dry Creek began to ring. Slow, distant, almost cautious. The sound carried through the valley, like an answer to a prayer neither of them had spoken aloud. When they walked back toward town, the people came out to watch. No one spoke. Sheriff Rourke stood near the well, hat in hand, eyes weary but kind. "He's free to go," he said after a long pause. "Town's seen enough dying." Lila's hand found Chayton's. He didn't pull away. As they passed the saloon, Celeste Hensley, the gossip who once called her cursed, bowed her head instead of whispering. Lila barely noticed. The world felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the snow itself had forgiven. They reached the ridge above town by midday. From there, the land stretched out in silence, fields of white giving way to green beneath the thaw. Lila turned to him, her voice barely a breath. "You could leave now. No one would stop you." Chayton studied the horizon, then her face. I did not stay because they let me. I stayed because you asked. Her heart stilled. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing hers. Your sister wanted peace, he said. You gave it to her. Now let it live here. His hand pressed hers gently against his chest, over the steady beat beneath. And as the last flakes of the storm melted into the earth, Lila understood. Mercy had not spared her heart, it had remade it. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, soft as memory. The snow glittered like glass, and the world began to breathe anew.